If we could stand and pledge allegiance, and if we could remain standing, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to ask everyone if you could stay standing, if we could have a moment of silence for the tragedy that took place in Las Vegas with all those innocent people that were massacred. Thank you. Okay, on tonight's agenda, we have the minutes to accept from September 19th, executive session as well. We have the treasurer collector here. We'll be talking about a tax title auction. We have appointments for a personnel board member. We have appointments to make for two firefighter paramedic individuals. We are going to look at revising the agreement with Colonial Power Aggregational Plan, which we had already done. We're going to motion to approve or to consider approval, which we probably will, for Steve Metellian for financial compensation as a contractor within the town of Upton. We will be discussing the possibility of establishing a technology committee. The Rose Garden has requested a change of date for the Haunted Trail Bloomer Girls fundraiser from October 21st, 22nd. We will look at that. We have some acceptance of donations to the Senior Center. A couple of other things I would like to bring up is the Fire EMS Advisory Committee, and I'd like to also readdress the marijuana issue for the town. And then the board will go into executive session under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21, to exceptions number 3, to discuss strategy sessions with respect to collective bargaining if the chair declares an open meeting will have a detrimental effect on town's bargaining position. The board will only adjourn from the executive session for purposes of adjournment of the total meeting. There will be no further business conducted at that time. It is also a tragedy because this individual has done so much for the town of Upton. It's with a great deal of sympathy that we acknowledge the death of Steve and Eileen Rackeden's son, a very young man that passed away, and it's a tragedy, and we wish the best to Steve and his family. Okay, if we could have a motion for the regular meeting minutes of September 19th, executive session of September 19th, please.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to accept the regular session minutes and executive session minutes as written from September 19th.
Second the motion.
That's unanimous action of the board. Okay, our guest tonight, Mr. Glowacki, our treasurer collector. We will be talking about tax title. Mr. Glowacki, how are you?
Hello.
Would you like to preclude this as to where we are?
Sure. So, as we all may remember at the last board meeting, there were a number of properties that were discussed to go up under tax title auction. At that time, 28 Hartford North and Station Street, I believe, were the two that were slated for auction. I've since had a couple of communications from Mr. Glowacki, who would like to talk to the board about, as I had presented those other parcels, we asked the conservation agent to go walk those properties, and he determined that the vast majority of those properties, 90% of the land was wetland. And so that was what I presented at the last meeting, and thought it was best not to put those up for auction. But Mr. Glowacki has talked to the auctioneer, who has stated that there will be no additional cost to the town if we were to put those parcels up for auction. Maybe we can sell them, maybe we won't, but I think that's what he wanted to talk to us about.
Yeah. And just as an example, we did an auction probably a little bit more than 10 years ago, and that Station Street, as a matter of fact, we even had a bid of $12,500 for it. So a lot of times people who have adjoining property, or they didn't look the right way, we still get bids. So there's no extra cost to this. The auctioneer is going to be getting a premium that's paid by the owner, the new owners of the property. So there's no cost to the town. So my suggestion would be to have as many of these parcels, auctioned off as possible, and at no cost to us and only an upside.
Gentlemen, I'll open it up for debate.
No, we have nothing to lose but money, so.
And then there's the other part too, of course, is the Westboro, which is the largest piece of property, and I had some questions that were about that, and not to debate it, but questions of whether or not it should be pulled off the auction block. And I know that the last decision was to do that. And I just wanted to give my thoughts on it and stick with that. And that is, at least a month ago, I asked the Cemetery Commission whether or not they had made a formal request for a cemetery, and I was told not. And maybe we can get some further clarification with Glenn in the back there. But I was unaware that anybody had made a formal request for that as a cemetery. My second question was, there's a request from the conservation to hold that property as well. So if it's made cemetery, then you've blocked off conservation. Conservation, as my understanding, has a piece of land that is landlocked right behind this property, and that's why they wanted it. You should also consider not only that if the site it becomes a cemetery, that it remains landlocked, but if it were given to conservation, we could open up a right-of-way conservation and still end up selling off this property. It has an assessed value of over $250,000, and it's over 10 acres, and so there's some potential real money coming back to the taxpayers if it were left on the block. And these are just my thoughts for you guys to, make that into your consideration of whether or not you pull it off permanently or not. The second part is that Koopman, the town lawyers, about 2002, came up with a letter that if this was to be moved into conservation, it should be brought up before the town meeting. Mainly because that gives formalization to the transfer of ownership, so that it isn't just labeled simply town property, but it's called conservation and is protected. So that's something that you have to consider too, that ultimately this would have to go before, or should go before the town meeting.
Okay, Gary, anything to add?
Do you want to talk about what we were planning on with the?
Yeah, actually, myself personally, I kind of was thinking in the short run anyways, we'd hold on to that land. I think it's a nice piece. It has a lot of frontage on Westboro Road. I personally was not in a big hurry to, earmark that as a cemetery. That wasn't my intention. I just think it's a good parcel to hang on to. It has other uses. There's always been, as far as I can remember, there's always been an outcry. There's not enough fields, soccer fields, lacrosse fields, things of that nature. I do understand that not all of it is good, high, dry land, but I'm thinking in the short run, it would be beneficial to hang on to that land as opposed to selling it off, for, again, a nominal fee. And it could still work as a cemetery. I'm not saying that it doesn't. I'm just saying I was not in a hurry to earmark it as a cemetery.
I would confirm what he's saying and add to it. First of all, we don't have enough corporate land in this town. We're very limited. We've seen that in times when we've tried to find land for different purposes, and it's very restrictive. Most of our town is state forest, or it's under a CR, which is a conservation restriction. Should the Conservation Commission want access to this land, I'm not adverse to it, but I would be a little concerned about making it a conservation restriction. Therefore, it's dormant land, which the town wouldn't be able to use. I think down the road, God knows what 5, 6, 10 years could be. And again, it is 10 acres. It's on the outside of our town. It's on the Westboro border, I get that. But you never know what it would be worth, and to have sold off the land for whatever we get at auction, the value for that land may be greater in future years. So Westboro Road, I'm a little hesitant to. As far as the rest, my concern was initially the cost of auctioning off land that would come back with limited value. Where there's no cost to it, I have no problem whatsoever to auction it off. Let's see what we get for it. If we get $150, it's more than we get sitting dormant without collecting
And
taxes.
it becomes tax-paying property.
Correct.
So.
Yep. So, anything else?
No, I just know we didn't really discuss anything with the Westboro land, whether to make it conservation
No,
or
we didn't,
cemetery.
no.
It was just ideas thrown out there.
Okay, and those were my ideas as well, that there's some alternatives that we could be done. I'll pull it off the list, there's no problem with that, and I will include all the other parcels along with Hartford, 28 Hartford, and we'll set a date. It'll probably be a little over a month because we're gonna be doing some advertising and making sure everybody knows about it. And we'll run with that.
Okay, probably best we give motion to approve the process. Gary, would you be willing to make a motion so that it's
Do
for
you want
record?
me to make for Mr. Glocke to put it on for auction, or town manager?
Just that we authorize it to go to auction is all
Yeah.
you need.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we authorize the following properties to go to auction. 0 Milford Street, 0 Oak Drive, 28 Hartford Ave North, 0 Station Street, and 0 School Street.
Second the motion?
And that's unanimous action of the board. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Okay, the manager's report is next. Derek?
Good evening. So, as I stated at the last meeting, hoping to communicate more openly and more efficiently with the public, so these town managers' reports will go out through social media after they're reviewed and approved by the Board of Selectmen. So that being said, I think many of you who have driven past Town Hall or attending here tonight, have seen that the roof is stripped at Town Hall. There was, back in 2015, there was an ice dam that created some water damage on the west side of the building, in that hallway area, that stairwell. That was repaired. The insurance company went out, identified it. It was still under coverage at the time. It was repaired the first time, but then 9 months later, we had another ice dam, additional leaking. The insurance company came back out and realized that we have to go through a more comprehensive repair. As you can see, they're stripping the roof down to the base. None of those repairs have cost the town any money, just so we're all clear. Hasn't affected the town's deductible. This is all being covered 100% by our insurance company because of the original damage going back to 2015. Additionally, just moving on, so from what I understand, the tax classification hearing is typically held on the week of, in this case, would be the week after town meeting, and so this would be the week of November 20th. That week happens to be Thanksgiving week. So I've talked to Kelly and others, and we are proposing that we may want to move the tax classification hearing 2 days after town meeting, which would be November 16th. So that's something, I'd like the board to consider, and we can then communicate that to the public. As far as information technology, as you know, the town entered into a community compact agreement with the state about a year ago. One was to create a financial policy. That's been complete. That's been approved by the state. The other one was to develop an electronic permitting program here in town. That's the permits that we issue with buildings, with electrical, with wiring, the Board of Health. Our town clerk is heading up that migration from the existing system, which is GOTMS, to the new system called Excella. We're hoping by mid-December, we're actually doing the migration now. We're hoping by mid-December that'll be fully functional. As far as finances go, starting yesterday, we have our annual audit that's taken place. The firm of Roselli, Clark & Associates is meeting with staff. They meet with the treasurer collector yesterday. Our town accountant came in last night to meet with them. We're hoping by January we'll have a report from the audit firm as to any findings that they have. I want to bring everyone's attention to Kiwanis Beach yet again. This past week, we received a notice from the state, Massachusetts Office of Disability. There have been additional complaints that have been filed against the town for not being ADA and Architectural Access Board compliant. We received a notice from the state that we have to comply. So there's 3 items they identified: that we have lack of accessibility to the fire pit, lack of accessibility to the boat dock, and the handrails to the ramp that will take you up to the Ramsey building are not compliant. Actually, there's no handrails as it exists. So we sent a response to them. We let them know that we have a transition plan that was just recently completed, and that we plan on remedying all of these deficiencies. Everything I just identified was identified in the transition plan itself. The state came back and they told us that although they applaud the town for their efforts, they still expect us to comply within 90 days. So I'm working with council right now on what type of relief the town can get from this most recent order. So again, Kiwanis Beach, I think, is going to be an ongoing problem relative to ADA and AAB compliance or lack of compliance. Moving on to some brighter news. The police department went through their accreditation last week. I was informed by the chief today that the accreditation team left late last week. Although they haven't issued their final report, it seems like they're going to get reaccredited for an additional 3 years. So those of you that aren't aware of accreditation, I had gone through accreditation in one of my previous positions. It is an exhaustive process. It is very challenging to go through accreditation. So when you see the chief and his team, thank them for what they've done, because that is a very arduous task, and we should applaud their efforts. The fire department last night, so I attended the fire department's monthly training event last night and had a chance to meet a number of call and career firefighters. After I had left, they went and did an exercise in the state forest. They practiced on how to identify and rescue individuals who may be lost in the state forest. They worked with the town of Sutton through a mutual aid process. They also notified me that the town has received an emergency preparedness performance grant of $2,500 that they're going to go ahead and purchase a thermal imaging camera with those funds. And then additionally, this week is Fire Prevention Week. The chief and his team will be out and about talking to folks and others in the community on what they need to do to prevent fires, both in the home or in the environment as well. I have one more item that I'm going to hold off on. It has to do with our municipal aggregation program, so I'll talk more about that when we get to that point in the agenda.
Okay. Gary, any comment?
No, I'd like to add the Quanah speech later on in the agenda.
Okay. All right.
I have nothing yet.
Okay. We have a motion to appoint Personnel Board member. Scott Van Ralton came before the board with a proposal. I believe Town Manager met with him. We deferred the appointment last meeting, so the Personnel Board would have an opportunity to meet with him, and they have, and we have a letter from the Personnel Board stating that they would be pleased to have him as a member. So it is before us now for appointment. Gary, any comment?
No, sir.
Steve?
None.
Okay, I'll accept motion, please.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion we appoint Scott Van Ralton to the Personnel Board for a term expiring May 2018.
Second the motion.
And I'll make that unanimous. And thank you, Scott, for coming forward on that. Okay, next I'm going to turn this over to the town manager through the fire chief. We have two individuals here up for appointment for paramedic EMS and at this firefighter paramedic. At this time, I'll turn it over to you, Derek. For the record, the board has catalogs of documentation on both individuals, and this process started in June 21st. So,
Okay.
please.
Great, thank you. So I'm happy to request the appointment of both Blake Montequin and Charles D. St. Croix, as full-time firefighter paramedics for the town of Upton. As you know, there were a few things that we had to work out with the union, and we were able to have a really collaborative conversation with the union. We wanted to include things that weren't in the union contract, such as probationary period and residency requirements, and the union happily agreed to both of those items. We've signed an agreement with the union, so we're going to insert those two new items in the collective bargaining agreement when we reopen the agreement this winter. So that being said, I am requesting the board to waive the 15-day right of refusal pursuant to Section 4A of the Town Managers Act and approve the appointment of both Mr. D. St. Croix and Mr. Montequin, who are both here this evening.
Chief, do you have anything to add at this time?
Other than relaxing and saying thank you.
Okay.
I think these are both great candidates. They've been with us for a while. They came to us as internal candidates. We went through an exhaustive process as far as interviews go. I think we're very fortunate to have both of these gentlemen coming to work for us. So I thank you for your cooperation, and I think it's a terrific day getting to this point, so thank you.
Okay, I open it up to the board. Gary, any comment?
No, just move.
Mr. Metelli?
No.
Okay, we're prepared to accept motion. You can make it for both individuals if you wish.
Do you need them both at the same time, or do you need them separate for seniority?
Yeah, I would make them separate,
Okay.
just for purchase of record.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I make a motion we appoint Blake Montague as a full-time firefighter paramedic for the town of Upton and waive the 15 days.
Second motion.
That's unanimous action.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we appoint Charles D. St. Croix as a full-time firefighter for the town of Upton and waive the 15 days.
Second motion.
Congratulations, gentlemen. Come on up and shake hands.
Tell us who's who. Tell us who's who.
Oh, I'm late.
You're Mike.
Yeah,
Okay.
nice to
Mike,
meet you.
nice to meet you. Yeah. Charlie.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Okay, next on our agenda, we have an agreement we had discussed at our last meeting and actually made motion with Colonial Power relative to an aggregational program for power energy. There have been some changes in it when the town manager went into the negotiation for the final contract. So, Mr. Brindisi, I'll turn it over to you, and if you would elaborate, please.
Sure. So, Mr. Taylor and I, please join me.
Bill,
We
please
both
come up.
We both
I
sat.
should not fail to recognize Bill. He's on 19 committees in this town, so
Yeah.
we have to recognize somebody that's dedicated to the
And
town.
he's really been driving this bus, so I'm happy to have him here this evening. So both Mr. Taylor and I, we sat in on a conference call. As I described before, Colonial Power, they went out and they received their final bidding last Thursday, September 21st. And so that was our first opportunity to hear about the new rates that they were going to be presenting and whether or not we wanted to enter in such an agreement. And so, you know, we entertained the conversation and we heard the professionals and what they were recommending as far as what they were envisioning could happen. Again, realizing this is a volatile market and things could change, we recognize that. And we wanted to try to think about what are the best rates for the community, trying to mitigate risk as much as possible. So although the board had recommended a 24-month agreement, we didn't know what the rates were going to be at that time. And it seemed like it made better sense, given what they had mentioned to us, that they believe that on the 18th month, they're going to see a decline in electrical rates. And so we thought it was most appropriate to sign an agreement for 12 months, and then we'd go back out yet again next fall for another rebidding, so we could take advantage of what they're projecting going to be a decline in rates in 18 months from today. Is that fair to say, Bill? And you want to add
That's right,
anything?
yep.
But I guess I would say, since I have an opportunity to speak, that folks are going to look at the National Grid bill today, and they're going to see their rate at about 9 cents a kilowatt hour. What we signed for was about 11 cents per kilowatt hour. If we didn't sign this agreement, the National Grid is going to be about, if we don't enter this agreement, everyone's rates will be at 12.5 cents. So we're saving about 1.25 cents per kilowatt hour by signing this agreement. And so I think people are going to get confused because they're going to see that they're paying a higher rate of 11 cents come the December bill, looking at what they paid last, but not realizing that if we do nothing, it's going to be at almost 12.5 cents. So we're going to communicate that to the public. I'm working with Colonial Power to put some messaging out, a press release. We want to hold a public information session where we can invite the public. They can speak directly to Colonial Power and ask those types of questions. But the more information we present, I think, the better educated and more informed people will be. At the end of the day, if you're not happy and you'd rather pay a little bit more in your electrical bill, you can always opt out.
Bill, anything to add beyond that?
Nope. After hearing what of course, yes. After hearing what the Colonial Power people had to say about what they believe how rates will move, we felt that the 12-month deal would give the most savings to the community.
So based on that, we need to rescind our motion, or I would say rescind the motion and make the motion for a 12-month period versus the original. So you can make it all in one motion.
You ready?
Yep, please.
Mr. Chairman, I rescind the motion with Colonial Power agreement from last meeting, and I'd like to make a motion to enter into an agreement for Colonial Power for a term of 1 year.
Second motion.
Friendly amendment authorize town manager to go into that contract?
Yes.
Correct? Unanimous action of the board, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Bill. We have before us, and I assume you will recuse yourself, Mr. Natalia? We have
Yes,
before
I
us A disclosure for a special municipal employee. Mr. Metellian owns a business in town and does contractual work with the town of Upton. Therefore, he's obligated by law to disclose this fact, and we as the board have to acknowledge it through a motion of approval. So you stand recused at this point. Thank you. Gary, do we have any debate on this or any
No.
comment?
Nope.
No. It's pretty boilerplate. So if you would, please.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to allow Steve Metallion to receive financial compensation with his towing business under exemption 20D.
I'll make that a majority action of the board. Welcome back to our meeting.
Thank you,
Thank you.
gentlemen.
Okay. We had a correspondence, and we've had a couple requests. This one is from the planning board. They've had interest in this as well, and that's for a technology committee. This has been talked about for a considerable time. One of the concerns we have is obviously to acquire the right membership and get the people of competence that are needed for this committee. It seems there is an interest. So at this time, the board, announcing the board would like to form a technology committee, and we are seeking applications. As to the number that serve on that committee, it will obviously be dictated by the number of applicants and so forth. So do you have any comment to this?
No, I just know a lot of citizens have been asking for something.
Yes, no major comments, I guess.
Okay.
I did not hear anything from the planning board, but I have heard through the grapevine
Yeah.
that people are talking about it.
Yeah, we have correspondence from them. And and the other thing is, the town manager and I spoke today about a social media policy, and that needs to be negotiated through all the unions, but the town is looking to readdress social media policy, and that will take place during the discussions with the local unions, so. Okay, Mr. Mike Campbell, who is owner of the Rose Garden, has requested a change of date from the Haunted Trail Bloomer Girls fundraiser to October 21st and 22nd from his original request. Does the board have any concerns with that?
Nope.
None. So could you just make a motion to approve the new dates?
Yep.
Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the Haunted Trail dates on October 21st and 22nd.
Second motion?
That's unanimous action of the board. Okay, I have, and I don't know what this is, but it always reads well, acceptance of donations to the senior center. Derek?
You're gonna advertise it.
Acceptance Senior Center? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, I was just asking a question, sorry.
Okay.
The memo dated September 27th, the Council on Aging has received a generous $100 donation from both Richard and Karen Broderick and the family of Llewellyn Wood. And they're just donating $100 to the senior center. They're asking the board to accept such donation so that the COA director can go ahead and apply it.
Gary.
No, I'd just like to thank them for their donation.
Yeah, very nice.
Neighbors of mine. Oh, very gracious, thank you. We have some members here from the Elder Services. Anything you'd like to add?
No, we're always appreciative of donations.
Okay, thank you. Well, it is with a great deal of appreciation that we accept this. So could we have motion to accept? We do have to make motion to accept any awards or gifts.
What was his name? Broderick?
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to accept the gift from Mr. and Mrs. Broderick for the Council on Aging.
Second the motion?
And that's unanimous action of the board. Derek, is there anything at this time? I've got a couple of things to go over, but
There are two donations,
what?
two donations.
It's right
It's
here.
both, yeah.
Yeah.
Is it two $100 donations or one
Yes.
100?
Two, yeah, one is
Different
from
policies.
Richard and Karen Broderick, and the other one is from the family of Llewellyn Wood.
Oh, I only,
Donated
yeah,
from May.
I only made a motion for the Brodericks.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was, well,
What
okay.
was the other one? Littlewoods?
Richard and Karen
Yeah,
Broderick,
Llewellyn
the other was
Wood.
the family of Llewellyn Wood.
Okay. I'll just make another motion with the other name. Mr. Chairman, I make a motion we accept the $100 donation from the family of the Wellowoods.
Second the motion?
That's unanimous action. Sorry for that mess-up. Okay, at this time, Derek, you have anything else?
I don't think so.
Okay, I'd like to bring this before the board. We talked last meeting briefly about the Fire EMS Advisory, and where it hasn't been functioning for some time, and I see there's a number of the department here, we had talked about the possibility of restructuring that, see if we can make it more efficient and get better inputs. So I open this up for debate. I don't know if my colleagues have had time to review this, have any opinions they want to express at this time?
I know it's in the, when we merged the fire department, that was in the writing, so it's
Mhm.
supposed to be there. I just think we need to, before it was too management strong, so we gotta open it up for the guys, so the guys and the staff have more say.
Our dilemma with this is it's part of a bylaw,
Yeah.
and we'd have to amend the bylaw. There is the possibility we could put it on the special. Put an amended, change the structure of that.
I think it doesn't say the rank, I just think when we appoint,
It's how it's appointed in the
Yeah.
structure the membership is made up of.
but I think the only guys that applied originally were all command staff. Am I right, Dan?
If I,
I think their appointments were only for 2 years,
Yes,
so if
But-
the particular committee hasn't met in a year or more, it may be a good time, provided everybody's in agreement, to just appoint all new members to that board. And I think there's some people that are willing to step forward. I
but
kind of got some positive.
one of the feedbacks is, and with all deference to the members of that you mentioned management strong, and the structure does require the chief to be a participant in it. And I think the advisory, the general consensus is it would be more effective if it's made up more of membership and less of management. So I would propose that we put a bylaw change on the special town meeting to amend that bylaw so it would be restructured and would allow for more inputs from general population of the department.
Is there a specific structure you're thinking of right now?
No, we'll have to, I mean, it's thrown on the table, it's a little early, maybe at our next meeting, we could all come back with a structure
Okay.
that we would feel would be suitable.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You okay with
Yes.
that?
Yep.
Okay, yeah.
So I can do a placeholder article until we determine the structure that's being proposed?
That would be fine, yeah.
Okay.
That draft of that meeting is the warrant. When's that gonna be brought?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
It'll be
so
released tomorrow.
Electronically released to all of us, okay. Because we'll need to review that. There's a couple of other things we talked about that are still in the works. Addressing the unregistered vehicle bylaw. As we know, that's somewhat antiquated, especially for businesses, which gentleman to my right well knows. Doesn't have the impact it should. So that's one that we want to talk about. And that's pretty much what I have on the list. When I see the warrant, there's a couple of things on there that we wanted, so. Okay, is there anything else you wanted to add this time?
No.
Gary?
I'd like to discuss the Kiwanis Beach a little bit.
Okay, please.
It seems like every time we turn around, there's another complaint or anything. I think maybe we should just lock the gates until we can come up with a good solution. I mean, just throwing it out.
I guess that's the question. I mean, do you appropriate or try to appropriate money to tackle all the problems all at once, or do you try to fix them in stages? And certainly, we've had, different conversations, especially regarding the building there, the Ramsey building, as to how much money do you really want to put into that building where it's an old building? So there's a lot of moving parts there.
I mean, how much would be affected if we, I don't know, block the gates? I mean, how often are the fields used? And
Well, I have another proposal. I mean, we're out of the season right now, so the useful aspect of that, it's going to be pretty much closed up through the winter months. I would propose that the Board of Selectmen, along with the RecCom, and possibly even the Planning Board, we coordinate a meeting to start the process of reviewing what's the cost, what are the best options. There are a number of options that would be available to us, and, for us to just, with all respect to what you're saying, to just close the gate without looking at where potential options are. We're going to need to address it. We're cited by the Commonwealth as violation of the ADA, so we're definitely going to need to address it. I would like to start some dialogue to go through that.
are we liable for any fines or anything if we don't fix this so fast?
Not at this time, we are not. We've already responded once to the state, like I mentioned earlier. They weren't satisfied with our response. I actually have a conference call tomorrow with the rec director, DPW director, and our council, who have reviewed the documentation. They have a few ideas they want us to consider. So we're pursuing what we can do on a legal end.
Okay, we're in agreement with that?
Yep.
So we'll start that process? Okay, good. Okay, anything else?
Nothing else.
Okay, Gary?
I'm all set, sir.
Derek? Okay, general public, there were some people that wanted to speak before the board. Question? Yes.
Lynn Haggerty, 10 Savino Lane, the Kiwanis Beach issue. We still have the soccer season upon us. And so therefore, we're using the lower parking lot. But the gate is locked to the handicap parking lot. And that, there's signage there, I sent in a letter. There's signage there that this is where the handicap parking is. And that handicap parking is for the tennis courts, the basketball courts, and the soccer field. I am trying to understand why that would remain locked. That doesn't have to do anything to do with, that's just with a handicap. If you have a handicap plate, that's where you park. Why, I don't know, there seems to be some confusion. And I see people walking up there with canes and the gate is locked, or, you know, if they have a handicap plate, they should be able to drive up there and park. That's what those spaces are for. I don't know, I'm trying to figure it out. Doesn't make sense to me. Anybody wanna,
We'll look into it.
You'll look into
If
it?
it doesn't make sense, it obviously doesn't make sense, so.
well,
we'll
I'm
correct
just
it.
trying to understand it all, and, I do wanna remark that, that I think the access board is perfectly, that, to my knowledge, will work with you, and just like the Living and Learning Center will work with you. I don't know about the other complaints, I will say that right up front. But they'll be willing to work with you, I'm sure you,
They're not.
they're not at this time? I don't know.
They applaud us for our efforts, but they says we
Okay.
must comply.
Okay.
That's verbatim.
Well, some things are safety issues, you know?
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
I guess at this point, are those two, is that particular portion considered legal and in compliance? Are those two, I guess, I'm not sure exactly the answer there.
Well,
Are
that's,
those two spots
that's
legal
the
right now?
purpose of him having to look into it to
Yeah,
make
I'm
sure
gonna
it's
talk
compliant.
to Andrew and Vin tomorrow about that. I think they were closed because they were non-compliant, but I can follow up with them just to be sure.
Okay, we'll disseminate that out. Okay, anyone else? Yes.
Hi, I'm Deb Lazar's 10 Farrar Road. I want to preface this by stating that I've put a lot of thought and energy into making a statement and making sure that this is the correct way to do it, and I keep coming back to that I need to make a statement here. So I'm here to address the personal comments made by you, Mr. Fleming, at the end of the Board of Selectmen meeting last meeting on the 19th. In our democracy, I feel and I believe, and I'm truly blessed that we are given the freedom to question things. This includes being able to question our town officials whose citizens elect or people serve on our boards and committees. Those individuals who find themselves serving in this privilege of leadership should embody the high standards and inherent within their positions by treating all others with dignity and respect. Unfortunately, some comments made by Mr. Fleming at the end of the Board of Selectmen were not reflected of these standards, and they misrepresented the true intentions and actions that I took to facilitate a better understanding of the dynamics within the Town Manager Act Review Committee. I was the citizen that was looking for these applications who applied to this committee. And why, you might ask? Since there have been so much contention and divisiveness, I was interested in gaining some insight as to why each member desired to join the committee. Mr. Fleming, nor anyone else, has even bothered to ask me why I requested this information. Instead, allegations and slanderous comments were made with only assumptions. I absolutely did not ask for these public documents to discredit any of the members. I didn't ask for them to challenge their credibility at all. These implications are disturbing, and they're beneath the dignity of the board that you're elected to serve the people and for the people. With regard to my request of these applications, which are public documents, I sent a private email to the executive assistant asking why only 4 out of the 9 applications could be found online, and could she point me to where I could find the other 5. In her return email, in which she attached the 9 documents from files, a private correspondence was CC'd to the entire Town Manager Act Committee, to the town clerk, and to the police chief, opening it up to comments and questions by others about some conflicting dates on 3 of the applications. The conflicting dates was Mr. Holman, Mr. Rosenfeld, and Mr. Desjardins, who apparently submitted their applications in early February before any posting of this committee. All the other applications were submitted between April 12th and April 17th. Another statement made by Mr. Fleming was that I should be embarrassed, and I quote, "to stop going negative, especially when you are one who has not volunteered for anything." Mr. Fleming, you don't know me. You don't, and I don't feel like I need to explain my credentials to you, which if you were to ask around town, I think many would agree that it includes many positive contributions and volunteerism to this town. I do not need to be embarrassed for being a citizen who is fighting for a cause. Just because you and I don't agree on a particular cause or an action that I have a question about, or it doesn't make me a citizen who is out to undermine authority. Rather, it's what our democracy is all about and why we elect leaders to power to lead and debate. In a blatant attempt to further discredit those citizens who do not share your agenda, you took the time to thoroughly describe the distinguished qualifications of 6 of the 9 members of this committee, but you failed to include 3 other members. These 3 members happen to be 3 of the petitioners that were representing the citizens. They are also highly qualified. In fact, in reviewing their applications, they have volunteered extensively in Upton, a combined total of 50 years. Having reviewed the meeting minutes and attending meetings and watching the stream videos, it's readily apparent that these 3 citizens have been very active in this committee, bringing to the table and trying to facilitate open and productive conversation, bringing research and documents from other towns of similar size, and working diligently for nearly 200 citizens who petitioned for the formation of this committee. In fact, I believe our bylaws even state that they're looking for citizens, that they're looking for people who haven't maybe served in committees and things before to join committees. As far as, and I quote, bringing our town backwards and going negatives, citizens had to fight with the Board of Selectmen to establish this committee. The facts will speak for themselves. I encourage anyone to watch the recorded meetings or to look back at the meeting minutes to verify the following information. Here is the troubling timeline. A special town meeting in November of 2016, I proposed to the selectmen, or at the meeting, to have a formal review of the Town Manager Act. Seeing that our town manager was resigning, it seemed like a good time to do so. At the March 7th Board of Selectmen meeting, after citizen petition was filed to form such a committee, it was stated by Mr. Fleming that this was not a good idea at this time, and that it would hold up the process of hiring a new town manager for possibly 2 years. At the March 28th meeting, after an explanation by myself and Jim Floyd describing the 2 petitions to clarify any confusion, Mr. Fleming said, in quotes, a more beneficial approach would have been to come before the selectmen to discuss forming a committee so that proper analysis and findings could be presented to the citizens. This is what the first petition was already seeking. And at the April 4th meeting, there was initial talk about agreeing to form the committee. There was no public posting of this committee at this time. In fact, I sent an email on April 10th asking for a timeline of approval, as well as when we could start soliciting volunteer applications for this committee. So on April 11th, I received the next day a reply stating where to find the volunteer applications and a deadline of April 13th, so it's 2 days, for the applications to be submitted. The official appointments to this committee were made on the April 18th meeting. In closing, we live in such a great town, but it's going through some growing pains. It's a positive thing to have citizen involvement, to seek our citizens' input, and to request that our leaders have a vision and a plan for this community. I'm hopeful, Mr. Fleming, that as part of your legacy for the remaining months of your term here as Board of Selectmen, that you will support and assist this committee to finish strong. I have no doubt that this Town Manager Act Committee has great people on it and will bring forth some positive and thoughtful recommendations to you and to the entire Board of Selectmen. Thank
Okay,
you.
my only comment is I apologize. If you're offended, I specifically did not mention your name. I was clear not to do that. If you're offended, there's an apology. My only concern was that, to me, the only purpose for asking to look at their applications for whatever purpose, I found to be offensive. And if I offended you, I'm sorry, but I was offended, so we're even.
Well,
So let's,
well, they're public documents, so if treating a citizen like that, when they're asking for public
Well,
documents, is with not understanding and questioning.
we're not going to get in
is what's
debate
hard.
because we won't win, but I did not mention your name, so I did not.
I appreciate it, and I'm
yeah.
standing up on my
Okay.
own volition
And
to
that's,
defend my
it's
comments.
good for you to do that.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, is there anything else? Mike? Excuse me, Mr. Marchand.
Oh, it's fine. I'm in no rush.
Mike Marchand, 21 Warren Street, and I'm the Assistant Chief of the Fire Department. I'd like to speak about the advisory committee.
Mhm. Okay,
It's an integral part of our department. In the process of us going to a single point chief of both fire and EMS, it was many, many nights were spent in debate with two different groups of people to develop this. We had a very successful first group of people that did a lot. They did the compensation study, and they did, what was the other thing they did? Oh, the development of the covering company system. I think it's imperative that the chief be on that, because it's what he needs to work with, and it's an integral part. As far as the makeup of it, and the rules of how it's operated, if you look at the previous committee's meeting minutes and stuff that's been at the town clerk, you'll see what they did. The last committee, I truly believe, because a lot of things was happening in our department, failed. I think a new committee needs to be appointed. That previous committee, there's probably no meeting minutes and no documented meetings that they may or may not have had, or what they have done with it. So I think you got to start from fresh. I was glad to see at the last meeting that the chairman, you are the chairman, right, Bob? That Bob asked for people for applications. I believe, Mr. Town Manager, have you received any applications yet?
I think, I know of one interest.
Yes,
I
I
can't say
know
it's a
of one.
formal
Yep.
application.
I think if we push for that, as far as any changes to what we wanted to do, I think before we go to a town meeting, you better sit down with the guys, and not the management. You better sit down with the guys and decide what we want with that, because we're the ones that have to deal with it. You have to remember that it's not, the union has their union representation. It never really was a thing to like represent the call people. We had it made up of career, call, and a citizen, most importantly, on that, to give it the word validation or validity. So I really think if we just get a new crew in there, I do agree with Mr. Doherty that it shouldn't be just all officers. It'll work, but I just ask you, before you make any changes, you talk to the guys first.
just for clarity, your position is that you believe the chief should be a participant in the advisory? Okay.
Some guys may not like me for that, but I think
Well,
it
it's,
has to be.
as you know, I met with a lot of
That-
people, and that was one of the feedbacks I got. That was,
But when it was a 5-year process to go to a single point chief, and there was a lot of nights spent about that. I think of Bob Henderson every time I think of that committee. I wish we could name it after him. And one of the things that we made the chief a permanent fixture, and the other ones had term limits. I'm a believer in term limits. We put that term limit in there, adopted from another successful system, and so that we didn't have the same people in there all the time, to give other people opportunities. So sometimes term limits work, sometimes it don't. It has its application, but that's my opinion. I sat on all those meetings, and I do know the one thing was that the chief had to be part of it. So I just thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Appreciate the input.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Oh, do you have a question?
No, sir?
Oh, I guess one question. Do you like the current structure, or do you think that it should change?
I don't believe I have to read the interpretation of the law, or the bylaw, but I don't believe whether it says that anything regarding officers or non-officers.
I think it's just the way we ended up appointing. I think they were the only
Yeah, I
volunteers.
think you should give, maybe the board could give
Preference?
preference to who they, would like to see on that, but I don't think, I'm not sure, I'd have to look it up, but I don't think it says, exempting anybody or doing it, because it's hard, especially with our career staff, you could end up with an officer, so we have that in there. We want a career member, call member, EMS only, and the way to break down a lot of thought, but I really think if we just reboot it, we'll be successful.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mike.
Anyone else? Yes.
Jim Floyd, 10 Henry's Path, Upton resident, 22 and a half years. I don't know all of you on the board, but I'll speak to Steve Metallion, who knows. I like to talk, but I don't like to speak. But I'd like to make one comment, and then I have a question, and that's to the chairman. You just said that while you acknowledge somewhat insulting a member of the town, the woman that just spoke, that you didn't say her name. As someone who had, my wife, I believe, was also insulted without you saying her name by you for her involvement in this committee as well. And I would say that leaving someone's name out while making derogatory comments that can easily be traced back, and it's very, very easy in a small town to know who you're talking about, does not absolve you of what you've done. My question is, you said that the two of you were even, and I'm wondering exactly how that transpires. You also said that you were offended, and I'm wondering if you could tell me why you were offended that a member of this town wanted to access public information.
Okay, first of all, you used the word insult, I did not, so let's not go down that road. I was offended by the fact that somebody would want to go into look at the applications of individuals that came forward, and I could only see one motivation.
What motivation was that?
There's only one motivation. You can interpret the way you want, I interpret it the way I want.
Okay, so you started out your initial reply with a question of semantics, so I'm going to sort of stay in kind.
You're dancing around the subject, trying to get me to say something I'm not.
What exactly am I trying to get you to say,
Trying to
sir?
get me to say that I was totally wrong, and I
I don't
still-
care whether you're right or wrong. Please don't put words into my mouth, sir.
Excuse me, we're going to have a civil format here, all right? If you need to know where I come from, I explained it. I saw the action of going in and looking at the applications as only one motive, and that is to see if there's something in there that was problematic or wrong. It was challenged for the February date, and that was one of the explanations I saw. Anything that came out in an email is public record. So it wasn't something that I went looking for, it came to me. As far as appointments by this board, we don't even need a letter of application. Many of those individuals I know personally, and I have a great deal of respect for their integrity, and that's what I was defending. Not mine, theirs.
Okay, so you really didn't answer my question, but I'll move along. Since we are having,
That's a
since
very
we are,
cute
I'm
remark,
sorry,
but
sir.
what was your question again?
You asked me not to interrupt you, is that correct?
Well,
So,
you asked...
but I want to state for the record that I happen to know that Mrs. Lazar's had absolutely no knowledge in advance of the dates on which those applications were allegedly filed. I did listen to the end of your meeting, I don't know whether it was the last meeting or the meeting before that, when you addressed the issue. But during that meeting, you did in very colorful language explain that you can just walk down the street and grab someone by the shirt collar and appoint them to a committee. Then later in the same conversation, it appeared to me that you said that you had actively solicited certain members back in February, and that's why those applications were submitted in February in advance. Those two statements seem very, very contradictory to me.
I'm sorry you see it that way, they're not.
Okay.
Okay?
And I thank you for your time.
All right. Anybody else?
I have to ask, Donna Marie Floyd, 10 Henry's Path, I would like an explanation for the February dates. The committee was not even formed, it wasn't even spoken about, and yet 3 of the members have February dates on their applications. How is that possible?
Because when the first petition came out, which was way back, long before February, I said, you know, maybe we need to form a committee. Coincidentally, everybody had the same idea. At that time, I went to these individuals and said, if you're interested in being on the committee, would you serve? And they said yes. I said, shoot something into the Board of Selectmen. Okay?
Okay, I'm going to take
That's your answer.
I'm going to take your word. It
Thank you.
just seems,
Well, you said you
Does it-
take my word. Let's
Okay.
not.
just
Okay,
seems
thank you.
interesting timing,
All
because
right.
you were against the committee formation, but
No, excuse me, if you will look
on
at...
the 7th, in the meeting on the 7th, you specifically said,
I'm going to request that the minutes be pulled for the discussion that was held that night, and I endorsed the committee, and I will show the record that shows I
okay,
did.
and not on the
Thank
7th. You didn't. We read the minutes on the 7th, and you said, the petitioners looking into the Town Manager Act is going to set the town back by 2 years.
You know what this is?
It's in the minutes.
You know what this is? You find the 7th and you say I didn't, but you failed to look at another meeting where I said, yes, I did.
And you did a
So-
month later, which,
that's
so,
okay.
so it just seems odd that,
Look.
and for me, as a committee member, those particular selectmen with, past selectmen with all of their knowledge and all of their experience have not really come to the table with any new ideas, new thoughts, or change. They're basically on the committee to say, no, 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 no. If it
So-
ain't broke, don't fix it. And that is what the committee has been up against from the get-go. We had some good meetings, and then you interjected your negativity, and now we're back to where we started. And we have been working tirelessly all summer for this town to move it in a positive direction. And two outbursts from you, Mr. Fleming, and we're back to everybody with their dukes up. That's not moving the town forward.
Is that your opinion?
My opinion,
Yes,
yes,
okay,
is that
thank you.
you are trying to discredit and distract from the issues.
You've made your point very clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Hill?
James Hill, 31 Hartford Ave. I am a member of the Fire EMS Advisory Board, as far as I know still.
Yes.
I would like to state that I do agree with Chief Marchand, that I absolutely positively believe that we need this board. If the chief wants to sit in on it, that's fine with me.
Okay.
I just would like the people to know, though, that we did have a meeting, and the ball kind of got dropped, Mr. Fleming. As you know, you and I had discussed that the problem seemed to be that the call staff had no representation, that was the big issue with the fire department at that point. We had a discussion, it was being looked into, and that's where it stopped. So I think we need to get back on track with that again. And if my tenure is still there, I would like to stay on the board.
I responded to your email. Did you get my copy?
Yes, I did, but it was unclear as to whether I didn't know the length of my term.
Oh, well,
And it was basically, from what I understood from your email, was that tonight you were looking to dissolve the board, which would mean that I'm out of a job,
No,
and that I would be reconsidered.
we're going to dissolve the present structure and reappoint, and you were one of the ones that asked to be reappointed and for consideration.
Very good.
There are some others that I would not recommend be reappointed to a candidate.
Okay?
So.
Once again, I just would like to state that I would still like to stay on, whether it be as a member of the fire department or private citizen, wherever the road may lead, that I want an active part of the fire department.
And I acknowledge that in the email.
Thank you
Read the
very
last
much.
sentence.
Appreciate
Yeah,
that.
okay, thanks. Anything else? Hi.
Patricia Carnegie, 10 Pleasant Street. This is the first Board of Selectmen meeting I have attended. I've attended town meetings. I know a little bit of what's going on. I am dismayed to see the adversarial relationship. I've heard a little of this and a little of that. I don't see any reason why there should be any kind of offense drawn, taken, given. You are a board, you have your opinions, we have citizens who have elected you. To hear you say offense, I don't know why they wanted to take those papers, see them. I know it's their perfect right, and you have no right to question it. This is the way I see it. You may have your private opinion, but you have no right to accuse them of ulterior motives because you can't look into their hearts. You may think you know, and that's all I have to say. I thank you for
Okay,
listening
thank
to
you.
me.
Anybody else? Okay, the board will go into executive session. We're going into executive session under Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21, Exceptions Number 3, to discuss strategy sessions with respect to collective bargaining if the chair declares an open meeting will have a detrimental effect on the town's bargaining position.
Steve Battalion, aye.
Gary Doherty, aye.
Robert Fleming, aye. We're in executive session.